Hey guys, welcome back. In this tutorial, I'll be showing you how to get end of day option stats using the option chain data from TD Ameritrade. You can also use the option chain data from other sources, so long as you have the same data columns that I'm going to be using in this script. So to give you an overview, I have automated this script to make these calculations after I get option chain data. And if you choose to automate it as well, you'll get a printout similar to this log file. I'm running this in Mac OS, and I have added this script using cron. So each day I get a printout for the total volume of calls and puts, the put to call ratio, and that's for all the option chains I was able to get that day. Similarly, I calculate the put to call ratio for the open interest, and as you can see, it prints out the open interest for the calls and the puts. We also get the largest call positions by volume, and I have limited this to the top 5. So it returns the underlying symbol, the flag, in this case all 5 would be calls, the strike price, the expiration date, the number of days left to expiration, the total volume that day, along with the open interest and the volume to open interest on that particular strike, which is just the total volume divided by the open interest. We also get a printout of the largest put positions by volume. I also return the largest call and put positions by open interest. This first section returns the calls, and then we get the puts right underneath. After it returns that data, we get the largest call positions by volume to open interest. Again, that's the total volume divided by the open interest, which returns this last column called vol to OI. That lets me know that there's more interest in that particular strike than there is open interest. Right underneath, we get the same thing, but for the puts. So I use the volume to open interest ratio to flag any unusual activity. And then I scrape some data from FinViz, which will let me know if some of those that got flagged for unusual options activity are reporting earnings in the near future, which will get saved in a CSV file in my desktop, and then I could review these manually. As you can see, I was able to flag approximately 300 different tickers with unusual options activity. After we generate that CSV file, I return high dollar volume to put dollar volume, and what I do here is I multiply the total volume by the market price of each option. So the data will include all option chains for each underlying symbol, and here I just print out the top 10. As an example, on this first row, we have a total volume of 800 options that traded for the call side, but only 2 options that traded on the put side. We have a total of 805 options that traded for this particular symbol. We return the call and put open interest, and if we multiply the call volume by the option price at the end of the day, we get a total of $700,000 that traded on the call side versus 125 for the put side. Similarly, we do the same for the open interest. So for this particular symbol, we have a total of $1.8 million on the call side versus 0 on the put side. This percentage of total volume and percentage of total open interest returns the volume or open interest divided by the total market option activity on that day, which for these top 10 is very close to 0. So we have the call ratio and put ratio, which we see that there's more call activity than put activity. On the flip side, we get the high put dollar volume to call dollar volume on that given day. And again, we see that the put ratio is considerably higher than the call ratio. So for these 10 tickers, there's more activity happening on the put side. Now, we also return the top 10 by option volume. So these are ranked by percentage of total volume as the overall market. So for SPY, at least for this trading day, it made up approximately 22% of the total option volume. So we have our call volume, our put volume, the total volume for the calls and the puts, the call open interest, the put open interest, and the total open interest. We get our dollar volume for the calls on that day and the put dollar volume. We also get the dollar amounts for the call side on the open interest and for the put side. Similar to the percentage of the total volume, we get the percentage of the total open interest. So for SPY, approximately 5% of the total open interest in the option market is held in SPY options. And these last 2 columns get you the call ratio and put ratio so that we can kind of see the sentiment for these top 10 tickers. And this is the last table it returns for this particular script. So if we take a look at our script, we first have to require these packages, and the first thing we test, since I have this scheduled, is if the current day is a business day or a trading day. If it is, it'll make the calculations. Otherwise, it's just going to return not a business day. And within the script, I need to read in my options data. So I write these as RDS files. So if you're using data other than TD Ameritrade, you will need the open interest for all the options, the total volume or the volume traded. Most of the data sets include some sort of timestamp, which you'll want to format as well. I add that volume to open interest column by dividing the volume by open interest. If there's any error or NAs, I just assign 0 for that particular case. Next, we get the printouts. So you'll see the total volume for calls, the total volume for puts, the put to call ratio, and this is for the volume, and the following 3 are for the open interest. As you see, I'm writing out to CSV files as I make these calculations so that I can go back and analyze the data myself. Next, we get the printouts for the largest call positions by volume along with the puts. So we subset the options for the call side and the put side. I exclude any options that have 0 days left to expiration, and then I just order by total volume and print out the selected columns. From these options, I'm going to select any unusual activity. So I try to scan for any unusual options activity and I exclude any special options, and I return these columns for the options. So as you see, I write these to a CSV file in my desktop. You will need to change the file paths. We do the same for the put side, removing any special options, and again writing to a CSV file. From there, I just sort for the volume to open interest ratio, and we print those out for both the calls and the puts. After that gets printed out, I'm going to gather any options expiring in less than 35 days where the volume to open interest is greater than or equal to 15, and selecting those options that are not in the money. I select the columns I need, and then I get data from FinViz. I'm looking for certain metrics such as the short float and if any of these underlying symbols are reporting earnings. So what that table looks like would be in infos that got flagged for unusual options activity given my parameters. And this table does get saved as a CSV file in case you need to reference it later. Now after we get this data, I do a bit of more targeted scanning. I'm looking for the underlying close to be less than 20, having a short float greater than 0.15, and having a total volume greater than 100. But essentially you can use that table from FinViz to do a more targeted scan and flag any potential unusual activity given any of your constraints. Afterwards, we make more calculations by going through each of the options and returning its dollar volume. Since these values are fairly large, I subset fairly large numbers and return trillions, billions, or millions, depending on the length of that particular number, so that we get a nice readable table. So all I'm doing here is just formatting the table to make it more legible and then printing out the results. And after it's done making all these calculations, we save the stats as a binary file, which concludes the script. Well, with that, guys, this concludes the video. I'll go ahead and add the link to my Patreon where I'm going to be adding this script. Please consider subscribing to the channel if you haven't done so already. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video.